The smell hit him as soon as he walked into the kitchen, a sour, overpowering stench that made his stomach churn. He froze in the doorway, eyes narrowing. The bowl on the counter looked innocent enough, but something about it made his skin crawl. His mother-in-law's so-called fancy salad. She'd bragged about it for weeks, claiming it was her special recipe, one that always stole the spotlight at family gatherings. But today, it was different. Something was wrong. The first wave of nausea hit him harder than he expected, and he stepped forward cautiously. His mind raced. Was it spoiled? He leaned in, inhaling deeply, trying to pinpoint the exact source of the smell. A rancid, fermented odor clung to the greens, making him recoil. This wasn't just an off salad. There was something deeper, something that didn't belong. His eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out of this uncomfortable moment. There was no one in sight. His wife was in the living room, chatting with the guests. His kids were playing in the backyard. He had a moment, just a few minutes, to figure out what was going on. He couldn't let anyone eat this. Not with that smell. He didn't care how much his mother-in-law insisted it was her signature dish, this was wrong. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached for the bowl, his mind working quickly. What if this wasn't a simple mistake? What if there was something in the salad that shouldn't be there? He had no way of knowing, but the thought gnawed at him. With a quick glance over his shoulder, he lifted the bowl from the counter and walked toward the trash can, the smell still lingering in his nostrils. There was a sense of urgency now. He couldn't risk being caught in the act, not with so many eyes on him at the dinner table. No, he had to act fast and cover his tracks. His thoughts began to race. He had no idea how this had happened. Maybe the ingredients had gone bad. Maybe the lettuce had been left out too long, or the dressing had turned. But something inside him told him that wasn't the case. This wasn't an accident. It was too deliberate. His fingers gripped the edge of the bowl, his thoughts clouded with doubt. The last thing he needed was a scene at dinner. His mother-in-law wasn't exactly known for her calm demeanor when things didn't go her way. She'd already made enough remarks about how her salad was the star of every family meal. If he tossed it out, the fallout would be immediate and intense. But he couldn't let that happen. Not with something so off about it. He glanced around again, ensuring no one was watching. His sister-in-law's salad sat untouched beside it, pristine and fresh, and he grabbed it quickly. Swapping the bowls seemed like the only logical solution. No one would notice, right? It would blend in seamlessly with the rest of the meal. No one would think to question it. But as he set the fresh bowl in its place, a strange sense of unease washed over him. Was this really the best choice? Could he live with the lie? He didn't have time to dwell on it. He returned the contaminated salad to the trash, making sure it was well hidden beneath other scraps. There would be no trace of it now. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The decision had been made. No turning back. The guests would arrive soon, and dinner would go on without a hitch. They'd all enjoy the meal, and that would be the end of it. Dinner time. The moment of truth came just a few hours later. The family gathered around the large dining table, chatter and laughter filling the air. Plates were passed around, and the smell of freshly cooked dishes mingled in the warm, cozy atmosphere. But as his mother-in-law reached for the salad, there was a brief, awkward pause. "Ah, I see someone swapped the bowls," she said, her tone light but tinged with something sharper. "Didn't think anyone would notice." He forced a smile, his heart pounding in his chest. "Just thought the fresh one might be more appealing," he said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. She didn't seem convinced, but she didn't press the matter. Instead, she served herself a generous portion, and the conversation moved on. For a moment, he thought maybe he had gotten away with it. But then, the moment his mother-in-law took the first bite, everything changed. Her face froze. Her fork hovered in midair as her eyes widened in shock. She didn't speak for a few seconds, which felt like an eternity. The whole room seemed to fall silent. "What is it?" his wife asked, her voice laced with concern. "Is something wrong with the salad?" His mother-in-law stared at her plate, her lips pressed tight. She chewed slowly, as if the action itself required careful consideration. Her eyes shifted to him, and then back to her plate. For a second, it felt like time had stopped. And then, without warning, her hand shot up to her mouth. She looked at him again, this time with an intensity that made him shiver. "What did you do to this salad?" she asked, her voice trembling with something unspoken. This doesn't taste right." His stomach dropped. "Nothing," he said, his voice too calm for the situation. "It's just the dressing, maybe. Could be a little strong." But her gaze was unwavering. "No. This is something else." She put her fork down slowly, her hands now shaking. "What did you put in it?" The question hung in the air, thick with suspicion. He felt his face flush, his palms clammy. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His mind raced, searching for an excuse. But there was nothing to say. He had no idea how to explain what he had done, or why he had done it. His wife watched the exchange closely, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Mom, what are you talking about? What's wrong with it?" But his mother-in-law didn't respond. She stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor as she backed away from the table. "I need to know what you put in this. Right now." The room fell deathly silent. All eyes were on him. His heart hammered in his chest. There was no escape now. He had done something that had set off a chain of events he couldn't control. A growing sense of dread. As the minutes ticked by, the unease in the room only grew. The once cheerful atmosphere of the dinner had now morphed into something darker, filled with suspicion and fear. His mother-in-law's expression was unreadable, but there was a fire in her eyes that terrified him. "What's going on?" his sister-in-law asked, her voice sharp with concern. "What's in the salad, really?" He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but his mind was blank. The truth was too dangerous to admit. He had lied to cover up his actions, and now it felt like that lie was unraveling before him. "Look, it's just a mistake," he said, his voice faltering. "I swapped the bowls. That's all. I didn't think the salad would be that off." But his mother-in-law wasn't listening anymore. She had already moved to the kitchen, rifling through the garbage, her hands shaking as she dug through the trash. She was searching for something. The salad? Or something more? What did she know? What was she looking for? The air in the kitchen was thick with tension. His mother-in-law's hands trembled as she sifted through the trash, a look of desperation crossing her face. The sound of crumpled paper and discarded food echoed in the otherwise quiet house. She was frantic now, tearing through the remnants of dinner like a woman possessed. He stood frozen at the doorway, paralyzed with fear. What was she looking for? The moment she had stepped away from the table, his mind had started to spiral. His thoughts raced back to the moment he had swapped the bowls, to the time when he had first noticed something was wrong with the salad. But now, with her digging through the trash, it was like everything was coming undone. Why hadn't he just let it be? Why hadn't he just let his mother-in-law serve her salad and be done with it? But now, he had to live with the consequences of his actions. His wife, sensing the tension, stood up from the table and walked into the kitchen. Her eyes flicked from her mother to him, and then back again, trying to make sense of the scene. She stood silently for a moment, unsure of what to do. "Mom, what are you doing?" she finally asked, her voice tinged with confusion. Her mother didn't look up. She was still rummaging through the trash, her face a mask of concentration. "I need to know what's in that salad," she muttered. Something's wrong, and I won't rest until I find out what it is. His wife shot him a glance, one that didn't require words. She knew something wasn't right, and she wasn't buying his earlier explanation. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. There was no point in lying anymore. His silence spoke volumes. "Mom, stop," his wife said, stepping forward. "You're making a scene. We'll just make another salad, okay? It's not a big deal." But her mother's response was sharp, her voice cold with accusation. "Not a big deal? You think this is just about a salad? You think I'm crazy?" His wife's eyes widened, her face turning pale. She took a step back, her hands trembling as if she had just been slapped. He could see the doubt in her eyes now, the same doubt he had seen when his mother-in-law had tasted the salad. She knew something was off. She knew he was hiding something. "Why don't you tell me what's really going on?" his mother-in-law demanded, her voice rising in anger. "What did you do to the salad? What did you put in it?" The words hit him like a blow to the chest. He had made a mistake, and now it was too late to cover it up. His heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to find the right words. But there were no words that would make this right. No words that could explain his actions. His mother-in-law finally gave up on her search through the trash and turned to face him. Her eyes, once full of pride and superiority, were now filled with suspicion and anger. "You think I don't know something's wrong? You think I don't know when something's off with my food?" He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her gaze pressing on him. He could feel the room closing in around him, the walls growing smaller with each passing second. His mind was racing, trying to find an explanation, any explanation. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that there was no good reason for what he had done. His wife's voice cut through the tension. "Dad, please, just tell us what happened. What did you do to the salad?" He swallowed hard. It was time to come clean. But even as the words formed on his lips, he hesitated. How could he explain something so strange? How could he explain the gut feeling he had that something was seriously wrong with the salad? He didn't have an answer. All he knew was that something didn't sit right with him. And now, it was too late. His silence spoke for him, and the silence between them stretched on for what felt like an eternity. His wife's face hardened, her disappointment and confusion turning to suspicion. "You swapped the bowls, didn't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His throat went dry. His heart thudded in his chest. How did she know? How could she have possibly guessed? His mother-in-law's eyes narrowed. "So, you did it. You swapped the bowls." He nodded, his voice barely audible. "I didn't think it would be a big deal. I couldn't let anyone eat that salad. Something was wrong with it." His wife's face twisted in disbelief. "What do you mean, something was wrong? What was wrong with it? What are you talking about?" He couldn't explain it. How could he? He had acted on impulse, following a gut feeling that had led him to make a decision he now regretted. The tension in the kitchen was suffocating. His wife was still standing there, frozen, trying to make sense of his confession. His mother-in-law stood with her arms crossed, her face a mixture of anger and disgust. "Are you telling me that you switched the bowls because you thought the salad was spoiled?" his mother-in-law asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you're saying?" "Yes," he said quietly. "I thought it was bad. I smelled it. It didn't seem right." "And you thought you could just get away with it?" she pressed. "What if you had made everyone sick?" "I didn't think it would be that serious," he admitted, his voice shaking. I didn't want anyone to eat it. I didn't want anyone to notice." His mother-in-law let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't want anyone to notice? You didn't think that swapping the bowls would raise suspicion? You didn't think that your little lie would cause problems? He winced. I know it was wrong. I didn't think it through. But you have to believe me, I didn't want to cause any trouble. I thought it was the right thing to do at the time. But his words fell flat. His mother-in-law's eyes were filled with disdain now, and his wife's face was pale, her expression one of shock and confusion. The tension in the room had reached a boiling point, and there was no way to back down now. His wife shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't get it, do you? It's not just about the salad. It's about what you're hiding. What are you not telling us? He couldn't hold it in any longer. I didn't just swap the bowls. I thought there was something in the salad. Something wrong. Something dangerous. Both women looked at him, their expressions unreadable. Dangerous, his mother-in-law repeated. What are you talking about? He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. I don't know what it was, but I swear, something didn't feel right. The smell, it wasn't just spoiled. It felt like something was deliberately wrong with it. Like someone had tampered with it. There was a long, heavy silence as the words settled in the air. His wife and mother-in-law exchanged a glance, and then his wife turned to him, her face full of disbelief. You're saying someone tried to poison us? She asked slowly. He shook his head, the weight of the situation pressing on him. I don't know. I'm not saying that. But I couldn't take the chance. I couldn't let you eat it. His mother-in-law stepped forward, her face now a mask of determination. We need to get to the bottom of this. Now. The investigation begins. The house felt smaller now, suffocating, like the walls themselves were closing in. The moment his wife's question had hung in the air, you're saying someone tried to poison us? Everything had shifted. What had once been a simple family dinner had now become something far darker, something unexplainable. There was no turning back now. His mother-in-law's expression was grim. We need to figure out who did this, she said, her voice low but filled with an unsettling intensity. And we need to do it now. His wife stood motionless, her face pale as she processed what he had just revealed. His heart ached as he watched her, the shock evident on her face, but he couldn't blame her. This was a lot to take in. He had kept her in the dark about the unease he had felt all night, and now, the truth hung between them, thick and heavy. I don't understand, his wife said, shaking her head. Why would anyone do that? What's the point? His thoughts raced, spinning in circles. What was the point? Why would someone intentionally cause harm, even if it was just through a meal? His mind reeled back to that moment when he first smelled the salad, the odd, unsettling scent that he couldn't shake. He knew something wasn't right. The question was, who had made it so? His mother-in-law moved with a sense of purpose, but the anger still burned in her eyes. We can't just sit here and pretend this didn't happen. We need to figure out who's behind this, who wanted to hurt us. His wife shot him a look, one that held both confusion and disbelief. How do we even start? How do we know who did it? Her mother's voice was sharper now, steely. We start by asking questions. We start by looking at everyone. We look at everyone who had access to the food. We can't rule anyone out. His stomach churned as the weight of the situation pressed on him. The thought of questioning family members, of opening up to suspicion, felt wrong. But deep down, he knew it was the only way forward. His mother-in-law turned to him, her gaze hard. What exactly happened, then? You switched the bowls. But why? He swallowed hard. He hadn't fully explained everything. He hadn't said everything that had been going through his mind when he had made the decision to switch the bowls. He needed to come clean, but something held him back. The truth was far stranger than he wanted to admit. I don't know why, exactly, he said slowly, looking down at his feet. Something didn't sit right with me. I don't even know how to explain it. I just knew I couldn't let anyone eat that salad. The smell, it felt wrong. Not like food going bad, but like someone had put something in it. Something dangerous. His mother-in-law's face grew even darker. Dangerous? You're telling me that you thought someone put something in the salad? What are you saying? You're implying that someone tried to poison us? His wife's face paled even more. How could we not know? How could we not smell something wrong with it? He sighed, running his hands through his hair in frustration. That's what I don't get. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else noticed. But when I smelled it, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't let it slide. I had to do something. The silence that followed felt suffocating. His wife looked like she was trying to make sense of it all, but there was something in her eyes now. Suspicion. Doubt. Fear. All of it mixed together as she processed his words. It was the kind of look that he hadn't seen on her face before. The kind of look that changed everything. What if I made a mistake, he muttered under his breath. What if I'm overthinking all of this? What if I'm wrong? His wife shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. You don't know that. None of us do. But then, the reality of the situation hit him. They couldn't move forward without answers. They couldn't just ignore it and hope it would all go away. The thought of someone intentionally putting something harmful in the food they were about to eat, food prepared for their family, made his skin crawl. Whoever had done this, whoever had taken such a dangerous step, was still out there. His mother-in-law cleared her throat, the sound breaking the tense silence. We need to figure out what happened. Let's go over everything. Who made the salad? Who had access to it? His wife glanced at him, and he could see the frustration and confusion etched on her face. She was struggling to understand how everything had gone so wrong, how a simple family dinner had turned into something straight out of a mystery novel. I made it, his wife said, her voice thick with emotion. I made the salad. But I didn't put anything in it. It was just the usual ingredients. Lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, nothing out of the ordinary. His mother-in-law's eyes narrowed. So, no one added anything else to it? No one slipped anything in? No, his wife replied, shaking her head. No one did. That's strange, his mother-in-law said, almost to herself. It could be that the salad was prepared incorrectly. But no. It would have been noticed by now if that was the case. The suspicion in the air grew thicker with every passing second. They all knew that something didn't add up. But the more they talked, the more they realized how little they actually knew. There was no obvious culprit, no clear sign that pointed to anyone. There was no evidence, no proof. But there was something deep in his gut telling him that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. That someone, or something, was behind it all. The questions kept piling up in his mind. Who would do something like this? Why would anyone want to harm his family? What was their endgame? His thoughts spiraled as they all sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. The house felt colder now, the atmosphere tense and suffocating. It was a far cry from the cozy, peaceful dinner they had once envisioned. The peace had been shattered, replaced by a sense of impending danger. But the truth was still out there. And they had to find it. The first revelation. It wasn't until a few hours later, when everyone had calmed down, that the first hint of the truth emerged. His wife had left the room, still processing everything, when his mother-in-law turned to him. Again. We're going to have to go through everyone who had access to the salad. And we can't let our guard down. Who are you suspecting? He asked, feeling the strain of the conversation already. Everyone, she replied. Everyone who had access to that food. We have to question everyone and look at everything. He nodded, realizing that she was right. There was no other way. They couldn't afford to be cautious or timid anymore. As they began their investigation, something became glaringly clear: whoever had done this was smart. They had covered their tracks well, leaving almost no trace of evidence behind. But he was determined to find the truth. He would uncover the mystery, whatever it took. It had been 2 days since the unsettling incident. 2 days since he had smelled something off in that salad, 2 days of trying to make sense of everything. The house felt colder with every passing hour, as if the very air was thick with suspicion, unanswered questions, and fear. And still, no one had a clear answer. His wife was barely speaking to him now, her eyes hollow, her mind spinning with the possibility that someone in their family had tried to poison them. His mother-in-law, though steadfast in her resolve, couldn't hide the fear that lurked beneath her tough exterior. She, too, was grappling with the terrifying thought that someone had intentionally tried to harm them. It was only when the doorbell rang that things began to move forward. He was at the kitchen table, tracing the edge of his coffee mug with his finger, when the chime of the doorbell echoed through the house. His heart skipped a beat. They weren't expecting anyone. Not today. Not now. "Who is it?" his wife asked, her voice shaky as she came out of the living room, still wearing the pale look she had been wearing since the incident. He shook his head. "I don't know. Let's see." Opening the door, he was greeted by the sight of an unfamiliar man standing on the doorstep. He was tall, well-dressed, with a stern expression that made him instantly uncomfortable. In his hand, he held a large manila envelope, which he handed over without saying a word. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion. The man paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the house behind him. "I'm with the local health department. We received a report about a possible food safety issue." The man's words sent a jolt through him. A food safety issue? Was he talking about the salad? Was this why they were here? "Report?" he echoed, still unsure of what was going on. The man nodded curtly. "Yes. We're here to investigate and gather information. Someone from your household contacted us about a potential contamination, and we need to check the records and ingredients used in your meals." His mind raced. Someone contacted the health department? How did they know about the salad? How did they know they were involved? He glanced at his wife, who was standing in the doorway behind him, her eyes wide in shock. I didn't contact anyone," he said slowly, trying to piece together the situation. "But we did have an issue with some food we ate recently." The man raised an eyebrow but didn't respond immediately. He simply stepped past him, walking into the hallway as though he had been expected. "We'll need to see your kitchen," the man said. "It's standard procedure to inspect the food that was potentially contaminated. We'll also need to speak with anyone who handled the food." As he watched the man move through the house with purpose, his heart sank. Something wasn't right. The pieces weren't fitting together. Why hadn't anyone warned them that the health department was involved? His wife stepped closer, her face a mix of confusion and anxiety. "What's going on?" she whispered. Before he could respond, the man turned sharply, his eyes piercing as he addressed them. "The contamination report came from someone who made a complaint. You need to cooperate with the investigation. For your safety, as well as everyone else's." The room seemed to close in around him. Whoever had contacted the health department knew more than they should. Someone from their family, someone who had been in that house, had called them in. But who? His wife's voice trembled as she spoke. "What are you saying? Someone tried to poison us?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out a notebook and began writing down notes. His eyes flicked back and forth between the couple, his pen moving furiously across the paper. "I'm not saying anything yet," the man said, his voice low and careful. "But there's an investigation to be done. The sooner we can get to the bottom of this, the better." The man's presence was both reassuring and terrifying. They needed answers, but something about the way he was acting made him feel even more unsettled. The health department wasn't just here to investigate the food. They were here to uncover something far darker. A deeper connection. The investigation began that very day, and it didn't take long for them to realize that the situation was more complicated than anyone had imagined. The health department worker was thorough, asking detailed questions about the meal and the ingredients used. He even demanded to see every item in the refrigerator, checking for any signs of contamination. It was when they reached the fridge that the first breakthrough came. "Did anyone add anything unusual to the salad?" the investigator asked, pulling out a bag of lettuce and inspecting it carefully. His wife stood frozen in place, her face pale. "No. I didn't add anything out of the ordinary. Just the usual ingredients." The investigator nodded but continued his search. His eyes narrowed when he pulled out a small bottle of olive oil. "What about this?" he asked, holding up the bottle. His wife blinked, clearly confused. "That's just regular olive oil. We use it all the time." The man examined the label, then glanced up at her with a sharp look. "Who bought this?" "I did," his wife answered hesitantly. "A week ago. I always buy olive oil from the same store." The investigator set the bottle aside, making more notes in his book. "Has anyone else used this in the salad? Is it possible that something was mixed with it?" His wife shook her head again, her hands trembling. "No, no one else used it. Just me." The man's expression darkened. "Then explain why the olive oil doesn't match the brand it should be." "It's been tampered with." He pulled out another bottle from his bag, the label clearly marked in a different font, a different brand. The olive oil in their fridge didn't match. "Someone switched it," the investigator muttered. "Someone intentionally altered the ingredients." At that moment, everything clicked. The sense of unease, the unsettling smell, the feeling that something was wrong with the food, it had all been a result of tampering. He felt a chill run down his spine. Someone had done this on purpose. Someone in his home had intentionally switched the olive oil to something else. But who? The dark truth unfolds. The investigation deepened, and it became clear that someone had orchestrated a plan to harm them. The health department's findings only added fuel to the fire, as they uncovered traces of something unusual in the switched olive oil. It wasn't just a harmless mistake. It was deliberate, methodical, and dangerous. The only question now was, who had done it? His mind raced through the possibilities. His wife was too distraught to be involved. His mother-in-law seemed more focused on getting to the bottom of this than actually causing harm. Could it be one of the other family members who had been at the dinner? His gut told him that it was someone close, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. As they sat together that night, the weight of the situation seemed unbearable. It felt like they were on the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss of uncertainty and fear. The person responsible for this was still out there, and they would stop at nothing to see their plan through. The tension between them was palpable. Each of them had their suspicions, but no one was willing to point fingers. The investigation was far from over, but every passing moment felt like they were one step closer to uncovering the truth. The house had never felt so eerily quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of a car passing by on the street, they all felt distant. All the noise that had once filled this home was replaced by the unspoken tension, the uncertainty that hung thick in the air. The investigation was far from over, but each new discovery only led to more questions, more confusion. His mind was racing, each thought pushing him further into a state of disbelief. Whoever had tampered with the olive oil knew too much. They understood exactly how to manipulate the situation. But why? What was their goal? Was it revenge, jealousy, or something deeper? He had to find out. The need for answers was suffocating him. In the past few days, his wife had become more withdrawn, her eyes haunted with the fear of what had happened. She hadn't said much since the health department's investigation began, but he knew she was spiraling. She was afraid, not just of the unknown, but of the person who had done this to them. Could they trust anyone? The investigator had left earlier that day, leaving behind a sense of foreboding. He'd promised to return, but there was no telling when that would be. In the meantime, they were left to sit in this dreadful silence, wondering if someone among them was the culprit. It wasn't until his wife spoke that the heavy silence was broken. Her voice was barely a whisper, trembling as she spoke. "I think I know who did it." He turned toward her, his heart skipping a beat. Was she finally ready to confront the truth? Did she have some clue, some piece of evidence they had all overlooked? You think you know?" he asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. She nodded slowly, her eyes clouded with fear. "I can't be sure, but something about the way things have been lately. I have a feeling." He walked over to her, sitting beside her on the couch. His hand reached for hers, squeezing it gently. "Tell me, love. What do you mean?" She hesitated for a long moment, as if she was weighing the consequences of speaking her mind. Finally, she let out a long breath and began. "I think it was my sister." His stomach dropped. Her sister? The idea of it seemed almost impossible. They had always gotten along, hadn't they? She had been at the dinner, too, but to think that she might be involved in something so sinister, it didn't sit right. But then again, neither did anything else about this situation. "You think your sister did this?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. She nodded again, her face pale. "I don't know why, but she's been acting strange lately. I don't want to believe it, but I can't shake the feeling." "Why do you think it was her?" "She was the one who insisted on helping me in the kitchen that day. She was there when I made the salad. She was the one who handed me the olive oil to use. I never thought twice about it, but now I'm wondering if it was deliberate." The room seemed to grow colder as her words sank in. Her sister? The very thought of it made him uneasy. But there was no denying that the timing was suspicious. Her presence, her insistence on helping, the way she had been so eager to be part of the preparation, all of it was starting to look like more than just coincidence. But there was something else that bothered him. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how little they truly knew about her. Sure, she was family, but how well did they really know her? What if there was something they had missed? Something hidden beneath the surface? "Maybe we should talk to her," he suggested, his voice heavy with caution. "Find out what she knows. But we need to be careful. We can't just accuse her without knowing for sure." His wife nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I never thought I'd have to do this. But if it's her. If it really is her. I need to know." Confrontation. Later that evening, they made the difficult decision to confront her. The atmosphere in the house was tense as they prepared to have the conversation. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this was the only way forward. They had to know the truth. The doorbell rang. It was her. She stood on the doorstep, her face calm, though there was an unmistakable tension in her posture. She had no idea what they were about to ask her. He could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes as she glanced between him and his wife. "Hi," she said, her voice sounding a little too cheerful. "Is everything okay?" His wife stepped forward, her expression pained. "We need to talk." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything they had been through. Her sister's eyes darted nervously between them, but she remained silent, waiting for them to speak. "I think you know why we're here," his wife began, her voice barely a whisper. "You were there that day. You were the one who helped me with the salad. You gave me the olive oil." Her sister's face tightened, her mouth pressing into a thin line. For a moment, he thought she might deny it, but then her eyes shifted, betraying a flicker of something. Guilt? Fear? He wasn't sure. I don't know what you're talking about, she said quickly, her voice shaky. I was just helping. I didn't mean any harm. His wife's voice shook as she pressed further. But you were the one who handed me the olive oil, weren't you? The olive oil that wasn't the same as the brand we always use? Her sister looked away, her gaze shifting to the floor. He could see her discomfort now, and it made his heart race. Was she guilty? I didn't know, she muttered. I swear, I didn't know what was in that bottle. I just thought it was the right one. I was just trying to help. He took a step forward, his voice firm. Then why didn't you tell us sooner? Why didn't you come forward when we found out about the contamination? She flinched at the question, her eyes brimming with tears. I didn't think it was a big deal. I thought maybe it was just a mistake. But when I saw how you guys were reacting, I knew something was wrong. And I didn't want to get involved. There it was. The hesitation, the fear, the guilt. He could feel it. She knew something more. But whether she was fully involved or just trying to cover up for someone else, he couldn't tell. She wasn't giving them the answers they needed. The truth unfolds. Hours later, after the confrontation, the house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was suffocating, filled with unresolved tension. His wife and her sister had barely spoken after the confrontation. Her sister had left, but not before insisting that she had nothing to do with it, that she was just as much in the dark as they were. Still, something didn't sit right. He kept replaying their conversation over and over in his mind. Could she have been telling the truth? Or was she trying to cover up for someone else? What if the person behind the whole thing wasn't her, but someone else entirely? Then, late into the night, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his heart nearly stopping when he saw the name. It was the investigator. He answered quickly, his pulse quickening. Hello? Are you alone? The investigator's voice was low, urgent. Yes, what's going on? He replied, his mind racing. I have new information. You need to come down to the office right away. Without hesitation, he grabbed his jacket. Whatever was happening, he had a feeling that they were about to get closer to the truth. The darkness of the night clung to the streets like a shroud, only the occasional passing car breaking the stillness. His mind raced with questions, and his heart beat faster with every passing moment. The phone call from the investigator had been brief, yet it carried an urgency he couldn't ignore. Whatever information they were about to uncover could change everything. The truth was almost within reach. His wife sat in the living room, her face pale with worry. He could tell she hadn't been able to sleep. The lines beneath her eyes had deepened, a clear sign of the strain she had been under. But this was it. The moment of truth. He stepped into the office, the faint glow of the streetlights casting long shadows on the walls. His hands trembled as he opened the door. The investigator stood near the desk, papers scattered around him, his face tight with concern. You've got something, he said, barely able to contain his excitement. I know it. The investigator nodded slowly, his face grim. I've gone through the evidence again. There's something you need to see. And it's going to make everything clear. The investigator handed him a folder, its contents spilling out onto the desk. A series of photos, documents, and notes lay before him, each piece of the puzzle falling into place. It felt like the world was spinning around him as he tried to process the information. He sifted through the papers, one by one, until something caught his eye. A photograph. It was a close-up of the olive oil bottle. The label was partially obscured, but enough was visible to reveal something shocking. The oil in question wasn't just any olive oil, it was a rare, expensive brand that only a few restaurants carried. It was almost impossible to get unless you knew exactly where to look. He felt his breath catch in his throat. "How did this end up in our kitchen?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The investigator's expression hardened. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Someone deliberately placed it in your home. The bottle was tampered with, the seal had been broken before you used it. But here's the kicker, the oil was laced with something. Not enough to kill, but enough to cause a serious reaction. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." His mind raced. Someone had been trying to hurt them, but why? And who? The shocking truth. It was in that moment that the truth hit him like a ton of bricks. His thoughts rushed back to his wife's sister, the one who had been so eager to help in the kitchen. She had been acting odd, yes, but could she really be the one behind all of this? Could she have known about the oil and its dangerous contents? But then the investigator dropped another bombshell. "There's more," he said, his voice tense. "We traced the source of the olive oil. It didn't come from anywhere near your town." His heart pounded in his chest as the investigator continued. "It came from your wife's sister's friend. A supplier she's been working with for years. The same person who had access to that rare brand of oil." A cold shiver ran down his spine. Could it be possible? Had her sister been unknowingly dragged into this conspiracy, or was she the one orchestrating it all? "You need to talk to her," the investigator advised. "I'm not sure what her involvement is, but this supplier has a shady reputation. He's been known to sell products on the black market, but no one's been able to prove anything, until now." The confrontation, truth or deception? With the revelation hanging heavily in the air, he rushed home, the folder clutched tightly in his hand. He barely spoke a word to his wife as he entered. She stood up, her face filled with concern as she saw the folder in his hand. "What is it?" she asked. "What did he tell you?" "The olive oil," he started, his voice shaky. "It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident." His wife's face grew paler as he spoke. "What do you mean?" He recounted everything, the rare oil, the tampering, the shady supplier. Her expression shifted, confusion and fear taking over her features. She looked at him, wide-eyed. "You're telling me my sister's involved in this?" "I don't know," he replied. "But we need to find out. We can't ignore this. It could explain everything." His wife was silent for a long time, her thoughts clearly racing. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can face her again. After everything that's happened, I'm not sure I can trust her anymore." He understood. The emotional toll had been enormous. What started as a simple family gathering had spiraled into something dark and dangerous. He couldn't imagine what she was going through, the betrayal, the shock. It was too much. But they couldn't stop now. They had to know the truth. The final confrontation. The next morning, they arrived at her sister's house. He could see the uncertainty in his wife's eyes as she rang the doorbell. A deep breath, a long pause, and then the door opened. Her sister stood there, her face pale, eyes downcast. "Can we talk?" his wife asked, her voice strained. Her sister stepped aside, allowing them into the living room. The air was thick with tension. The silence was suffocating as his wife and her sister faced each other. He stayed quiet, unsure of what to say, but he could see the storm brewing in the room. They both knew what this conversation was about. "I know what you did," his wife said, her voice trembling. "You gave us the olive oil. The one that was tampered with. The one that nearly killed us." Her sister froze, her face draining of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she broke the silence. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I swear, I didn't know. I just I thought it was the right oil. The one we always use. His wife's face contorted with disbelief. But it wasn't. You handed me the bottle. You were there when I was making the salad. How could you not know? Her sister took a step back, her eyes brimming with tears. I didn't know it was that brand. I didn't know it was dangerous. I didn't know. The room grew colder as the truth began to unravel. Her sister's guilt was palpable, but was she telling the truth? He couldn't say. But he could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of being caught, of losing everything. I know who's behind this, her sister said suddenly, her voice shaking. It's not just me. It's the supplier, the one I've been working with for years. I thought I could trust him. But now, I don't know what to believe anymore. The final lesson. As they left her sister's house, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on them. They didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear: they had survived. They had made it through something that could have easily destroyed them. The final lesson was one of trust, of knowing who to trust, and who not to. In the end, it wasn't just about the olive oil or the sabotage. It was about the people in their lives and how much they really knew about them. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries are the ones hidden in plain sight, the secrets we carry within ourselves, and the ones we think we know about others. It's not just about surviving, it's about learning to trust our instincts, and sometimes, learning the hard way that things aren't always as they seem. They had uncovered the truth, but the journey had changed them. The twists and turns had shown them that even in the darkest of times, survival wasn't just about finding the answers. It was about resilience, about facing fears, and about the strength to keep moving forward, no matter the odds. The truth came out, not just about the olive oil, but about the people around them. It was a hard lesson to learn, one that would take time to process. But it was a lesson that would stay with them forever. As the investigator closed his file, he offered one last piece of advice: trust your instincts. They've gotten you this far. Don't let the truth slip away. And so, they did. They carried on, stronger and wiser, knowing that the greatest mysteries were not always solved in the way they expected. Sometimes, the answers were hidden in the most unexpected places.